So last week and the week before, I think, we were in Romans 13. And last week we talked about love. And we were sort of focused on the fact that love has a different definition in the biblical sense than it does in our culture. And so today we're going to talk about how this works practically in relationships. And so this is like basically part 3 of our discussion on love. We're going to continue talking about like love and relationships for another couple of weeks. In a lot of ways, this little wrap this morning builds on the last couple of weeks of talks. So if you haven't been here, you may be missing some of the context for what we're talking about. And you'll probably have missed all of the Bible verses that we attached to this topic. But I think that you'll probably still find some stuff that you can get a hold of and, work on, even if you're just here this morning. So if you need to or are interested in the context and the background verses for this morning talks, the audio of the last couple of teachings is up on the shared Google Drive. And if the YouTube isn't already up, it will be at some point. So you can look for it there. So the definition that we ended up settling on last week for the biblical definition of love is a commitment to give of myself in every area for the good of another. And so first, we're going to point out that it's a commitment. Okay, it's not just a feeling that you have. It's a decision that you make to give love to someone. And we also pointed out that it matters in this definition that this is a giving out. There's a sacrificial part of this aspect of love. And so that's the aspect of this that Jesus stressed. And so this is very unlike the selfish kind of love that most people are familiar with, where they really just want to take and get feelings from another person. So this is a love that is truly determined to give out from my life to another person. And it's a giving out in every area. So this part is in this definition because I would say so many of us are willing to give in some areas, but not in others. So we end up with this very deficient and very unbiblical kind of love. And lastly, it's for the good of another. And so this basically means that we're trying to enhance the life of the person that we love. And so we kind of need to think about this in terms of giving a person what they need or what's good for them as opposed to giving them what they want, because they're often not at all the same thing. And so under this definition of love, you may have to confront people, and they may not always be happy with you. So this is doing the best thing that you can for the other person. And the cross of Christ is like the perfect image of this. Okay, this is the ultimate expression of Christian love. This is the most loving act that has ever happened in all the universe. And it perfectly fits this definition. Okay, Jesus didn't go to the cross because he felt like it. And he didn't go because he got some kind of rush from it. And you can actually see that he didn't want to do this at all. He kind of dreaded it, and he asked if there was any other way to accomplish this job. But he was also completely committed to this course of action. And this is why he had come, and he went ahead and he did it. It was a giving out of himself. It was a literal maximum sacrifice of his own life for our good. And so he went to the cross for our good. It wasn't because it would benefit him in any way. It was all together for our sake, because that was the only way for us to be granted forgiveness, and it was the only way to open the door for us to get in there with God. So anyway, I think that this definition for love works pretty well. All right, I think that it's a good one. And so this morning we're going to get into this in practical terms, and we're going to try and move out of theory and into the practice of love in our relationships. And so first we're going to go over some of the qualities that biblical love has, and then we'll think about 3 of the areas that we can invest in other people in. And then we're going to talk about different levels that relationships can be at, because not all relationships are the same. Each level means that you would invest in a little bit differently. All right, so that's what we're going to talk about. And last week when we did this and we were talking about our definition for what real love is, we introduced the idea of the dimensions that are essential for Christ-like love. And so we talked about the fact that real love is sacrificial. John 15 is the one where Jesus says that no greater love has any man than that he lay down his life for his friend. All right, so love is also righteous, meaning that it is willing to discipline. It's not the kind of relationship where like anything goes or whatever. It's the kind of relationship where you just care too much to look the other way and watch people go down in flames. It's also a forgiving love, and this part is absolutely crucial. And it's also the most likely part to be missing. People will often do everything but this. They just can't forgive the wrong that's been done against them, or even the wrong that they perceive has been done against them. And that ends up making their love relationships kind of a long way from the biblical definition. And we also talked about the fact that biblical love has to include this emotional aspect. So this part is up there because a great many of the deepest needs of any human being are emotional. And if we're supposed to meet the needs of the people that we love, then that's going to include some of their emotional needs. And some of us really suck at this part. All right, it's just too awkward for us to lay out the emotional stuff. Okay, and then we put in this 5th concept right in the middle, and that is that biblical love is initiating. All right, God initiated love towards us. He didn't wait around for us to do something. And that means that we need to initiate in our love relationships. And so when Jesus said that we need to learn to love one another the way that he loved us, a big part of that is this initiating aspect where we put ourselves out there at the risk of being kind of left hanging. And this is the part that makes us feel vulnerable. Most of us are willing to do something loving if the other person will do it first. Okay, but taking the first step and trying to bridge the distance, that's the scary part of being loving. And so it's also the courageous part. And so in addition to reviewing those characteristics of biblical love, we want to look at some of the areas where we can invest and give love. And I briefly had this slide up at that very end of last week. And so there are 3 of these that I think are pretty significant. And the first one is what we will call common experience. And this is about the fact that if you hardly know someone, and you hardly spend any time with someone, then you really just can't call that a very close relationship. Okay, you can practice love even with strangers, but what we're talking about this morning is deep love relationships. And to do that, we basically need to spend some time hanging out with and doing things with the person that we're trying to love. And so the next thing is that we need to talk about our personal inner working. All right, and so here we're talking about the fact that inside of each person is a fairly complex inner personality. It's made up of like desires and goals and fears and hurts from the past. And these things are, they form a fairly complex web that's different for each and every person. And to understand what makes your friend tick and what the things that motivate them are that go on inside their head is a kind of skill that has to be developed inside of your relationships. And then there is emotional sharing. And this has to do with being able to express love in terms that are emotional so that we can meet the emotional needs that people really do have. So these are the imaginary categories that we're going to use this morning to frame what we're talking about. And then we're going to go through each of these categories for the different levels of relationship. All right. And so we're going to set it up like this. There are the 3 columns that correspond to the 3 circles that I had up a second ago. And we'll do this in terms of like casual friendships and a close friendship and an intimate relationship. And really, we'll mainly be talking about this stuff today in terms of platonic or friend type relationships, but it does apply to marriages and other kinds of relationships also. All right, the exact same skills and capabilities that allow for a biblical love relationship with a roommate or a BFF or whatever, like in a non-sexual setting, are exactly the skills that you will need to have a successful, intimate relationship in marriage. All right, there's really no difference. And in fact, I would say that it is a really good predictor of success in marriage if you can do these things in a friendship. All right, someone that already has these skills and uses them in their platonic relationships has all of the tools to be successful in their marriage relationship. All right. And all of this stuff is a learned skill. Okay. None of this comes naturally. There are not people anywhere on the planet that are just naturally loving people in the biblical sense. Okay. There's always learning that happens somewhere along the way to make people capable of this. And so some people learn some of it at home when they're growing up, and some people don't. All right, but we all have to learn to do all the parts of this if we're going to make this work. And so it's just not a legitimate excuse for not loving someone to say something like, well, I'm just not like that, or that's not the way I am. Okay, so no one is like this. We all have to learn to do these things. And it's a learning curve that extends over many years to really get to the point where you're actually a fairly loving person. And remember, being a loving person is the main thing that Jesus wants us to be. It's the summary of everything that God asks from us. And some of us have huge problems with relationships. And we've still got a lot to learn. So we just don't really have any good biblical love relationships. And some of us are a little further down the line. All right. But none of that matters because we can always find places to progress further. And so as we go through these things this morning, I think that we'll all find things that we can work on. And so casual relationships are the first step and the first category of relationship that we enter into with people. And, some of us are really bad at even entering into this very first step. So we may have a few casual relationships, but we don't even know how they got started. All right. So it must have been the other person that started them because it sure wasn't you. All right. And this is even worse when you just don't seem to click with people. It's almost as if that click is a necessary part of any relationship. And for the record, it's not. All right. And so anyway, if you do not know how to strike up a casual relationship, then this is how you do it. All right, so you have to have some common experience. But at this casual level, the common experience is probably going to be pretty sporadic. So it's not like you're hanging out constantly or anything. But now and then, you guys do something together or in a group together. You at least rub shoulders at the same events. And most of the times that you are with a casual friend, it tends to be like pretty short term, and the interactions are relatively superficial. So you goof around, you have a good time without usually having really deep talks or really, getting deep into what's going on in each other's lives. But you do have to take the initiative and put in the time to actually spend it with someone in order to even get this kind of relationship off the ground. All right. And this means that you're going to have to exit your comfort zone to some extent. You got to come out of your world and enter the other person's world and engage with them there. And so, like ask them what they're doing this weekend, and then like ask if you can join them, right? That's weird. See how though that's different than asking them to enter into your world? All right, so you're taking the initiative to develop some common experience in a place that they were going to go anyway. And if they refuse you and you feel like an idiot, then that's just the price that you're willing to pay to maybe get this thing going. And so if we're not willing to risk rejection, then we're not going to develop new friendships. All right, so if we look at the inner working part of this, then when we're getting to know another person, we're learning the other person's interests and what their goals are. All right, we figure out what they're pursuing, like, what they like, what they don't like, what their problems are, what they worry about. We learn about their background, their history. We also are learning about their spiritual experiences and what kind of history they have with religion and where they come from. All right, in that sense of religion, we explore the priorities of their life and what matters most to them. And in all of these things, the key is for me to get outside of myself and start taking an interest in another person. And a lot of us just can't muster this. All right, this whole thing breaks down right at this spot. And so I watch this happen all the time, right? Like I see a lot of people hang out with each other. And there are people that I've been watching for a while, and they never ever ask anyone anything about them, right? They just run their mouths about themselves or their experiences whenever it's their turn to talk. All right, they may make an observation or, quote lines from Family Guy or whatever people watch, but there's never any effort to get to know someone else. And there's nothing really wrong with that, but it means that you're not willing to pursue relationships with the people around you. All right, you have to get past the parts that come naturally in order to know people. And, this is often pretty superficial, but this kind of interaction where you're getting to know things about another person is how you build real relationships. And so if you've ever had a person take this kind of interest in you, then you know that it's actually a pretty good feeling. Okay? People like for other people to want to know them. And when you learn something about someone and then you follow up about that thing later, then they can see that you're thinking about them. And that's also a good feeling for people. All right, it seems like you care about them, even if it's an illusion. All right, so this is a very natural part of building any relationship. And when we look at this idea of emotional sharing at the casual level, we're talking about showing interest and warmth and maybe even enthusiasm at the idea of spending time together. So you ever spend time with someone who seemed excited to talk to you? All right. That is how you make someone want to spend time with you. All right. And talk to you. And for some of us, it's been a really long time since we expressed any enthusiasm for spending time with anyone, even the people that are most dear to us. All right, so this deadpan, short answer stuff is not how you communicate that you want to interact with people. All right, and a lot of us dudes need to think about that. Myself more than most. And so people interpret your responses as you do not want to talk to them. And maybe you don't, okay? But that's not what you should want to communicate if the object of the game is to build a relationship. All right, put a little feeling into how you respond and interact with people. It makes a huge difference in how they feel about wanting to be around you. All right, and we're talking about casual relationships here. But a whole bunch of us need to start rebuilding our marriage relationships and the relationships that we have with our kids in this exact spot. Okay, we're just too often too hung up and inhibited because we're so wrapped up in ourselves. Okay, we got to be a little bit more expressive and a little bit more vulnerable. And one of the reasons that we give these short answers and don't show much emotion is because we think that we're being cool. All right, but this is the dumbest possible reason to act this way to people that we're supposed to be moving toward. All right, if you're playing it safe and playing it cool and playing hard ass, then you are actively inhibiting this process. Okay, you need to project warmth. And clearly, I am talking to myself again, all right? The irony of me delivering this talk is not lost on me. All right, but can you think of people that project warmth? Right? I can. Are you one of those people? Or are you too uptight and tied up in yourself to worry about how you make the people around you feel? I am. All right, especially around strangers. And in those unstructured situations where you're milling around and sort of improvising what to do and say, do you essentially just shut down? Or do you gravitate to people that you know will talk to you? Or do you basically just flee? All right, so do you realize that what you communicate to the people around you in those situations is that you don't want to talk to them? You don't want to know them. And they're beneath your interest. All right, you must know someone that's good at this and that projects this warmth that we're talking about. So stand next to them. Okay, learn what it looks like to make people feel accepted and cared about. And then try it. All right? People practically line up to talk to people that make them feel like they're enthusiastic to talk to them. And this doesn't really take forever to learn. All right, smile a little bit, make eye contact. You can do this, okay? Even I can do this. All right. In no time at all, we can actually change the way that it feels to interact with us. Even at this casual level, we should have a certain level of sensitivity to the other person. Okay, and this includes an awareness of what is appropriate in conversation. So just don't be the person that will not shut up and runs all over the place, hitting every possible area of conversation. All right, I know that some people are talkative by nature. But if we're going to ask people to work against an introverted or shy nature and pursue people, then we're going to also ask conversationally assertive people to dial it down a notch. Let the other people talk. Okay, this is an important skill for some of us to develop in our ability to love other people. Some of us just need to shut up and listen for a minute. Okay, we are not fated to be subject to our nature. Okay, we can choose to do what is best for another person, regardless of what our inclination is. And so whether we talk all the time or we just give one-word answers to direct questions, we are being insensitive to what would be appropriate for building a relationship. All right, we have to be able to signal that we want to talk to someone by the way that we answer, and we have to be able to signal that we want to hear from someone by the way that we stop talking. Okay, this is basic sensitivity to the fact that the other person is real and they're standing in front of you to talk. So some of us really need to stop focusing on what we want to say next and do some real listening. And in that way, we'll be giving out and being sacrificial to this other person. Our responses should correlate to what they say. You know what I mean? Not be like segues into what we want to say next. Sensitivity also means that we need to share some negative feelings, right? Sometimes, like if we need to share some negative feelings or something that we don't like about the other person, then it's also reasonable that we would just sit on that sometimes. Okay, a new relationship or a very casual relationship is often not in a place where it's solid enough to withstand genuine criticism. And so the idea here is that we would just exercise some grace and ignore the things that bother us for the time being. All right, so maybe when the relationship deepens some, you'll be in a position to bring this stuff up. But a casual relationship moves to the next level a lot more often by showing some grace than it does by confronting every little thing that goes on. Okay, if you do have to bring something up, then you need to be a lot more careful in the way that you say things than you would have to be in a closer relationship a lot of times. And so if you just kind of follow the ideas right here, I bet that within a couple of weeks, you could build several new casual relationships or friendships. I don't think that's at all unreasonable. All right, so let's look at close relationships now. I realize that these categories are imaginary, okay, but we have to conceive this somehow, and it helps to approach it with some kind of system. It helps me anyway. In a close relationship, we're talking about the kind of friendship where we have regular time spent together, all right? And in this kind of relationship, this would include quality time, where we're actually talking about things that kind of matter, all right? So you would be talking about one another's lives and the things that are going on in them. And you don't always have to be talking about important things, all right? You can just sit around and BS or whatever. But at some points, there's also some real quality conversation. And when you have real quality conversations with someone where you feel like someone is really getting to know you, it starts to feel like love. And it's a good, beginning point for building a real love relationship. And when you're hanging out with someone regularly and having good talks with them, there is this tendency to start to share some of your goals and interests. You start to see the things that you have in common. And so you may find things that you already have in common, or you may develop new common interests. You may take an interest in something because this person that you're spending time with is interested in that thing. Okay, and in a Christian context, these common interests and goals can have to do with ministry work. All right, a Christian community is a goal-driven community, and there is common work to be done. Okay, we're actually here to accomplish a mission, and we can start to share that burden. And so the fact that we have a common goal and a common burden can help build these close relationships towards a common goal. All right, and praying together is a fantastic way to feel like you're friends with someone. All right, there is no way around this time spent together. This common experience thing is really important. And so if you haven't seen someone in a while, then you're really not moving forward in this close relationship thing. And I know there's the whole schedule thing, right? Like nobody has any time to spend on relationship. We should all just wait until our schedules align, right? The schedules are just going to align themselves so that we can spend time together. That's never going to happen. Okay, we got to get our heads around the fact that there will never be enough time unless we schedule the time. It is possible for you to prioritize different things and to make the most important things happen and to spend less time on the stupid things that we do. Okay, schedules do not just happen to line up. You don't find time, you make time. And if we're trying to build relationships, then we have to devote time to them. And as modern Americans, we can have a really hard time seeing it this way. So we tend to be pretty materialistic, and we think of all of our job things and all of our school things and all of our hobbies, and those things have to come first. And then, if there's any time left, then we'll spend some of that leftover time with you. All right? And that means that relationships rank pretty close to the bottom of what we think life is all about. But from what God is telling us, our relationships need to be close to the top of what matters. And then we need to fit that other stuff in. And if we're not willing to make time for people, then we're just not going to have these kinds of close relationships, and we're not going to be moving towards what God has at the top of his list. All right, that's just all there is to it. You have to spend the time. And when you look at the idea of quality time, what are we supposed to be doing during that time? Right? What makes quality time happen? All right, when you have a great talk with somebody, how did that happen? Well, it was probably because someone initiated it. And under the biblical mandate that we have, it's me that needs to be the one that's willing to initiate that, right? It's all of us. And this kind of thing doesn't really happen by itself. It should be pretty obvious, all right? People hang out all the time, and most of them never have any meaningful conversation. And it's because none of the people there initiate meaningful conversation. All right, so when we talk about the inner workings of a close relationship, there's a lot more freedom to communicate openly and open up about yourself. All right, you can ask some pretty pointed personal questions, and they shouldn't be offensive at this stage of the game. There's like a high level of commonality because of all the common experience that you've shared. And also at this level, you're beginning to build a base of trust towards the other person. All right, so you're a lot more willing to explore the areas of the other person's life than you would in a casual relationship. You're beginning to really understand this other person's problems and their potentials. And as you begin to understand another person's inner workings, you see how smart they are, or how sharp their sense of humor is, or whatever. All right, you begin to see that they're really an extraordinary person. And you start to wonder with God about what God could do through this person. And these insights all involve thinking about that person when you're not around them. All right, we're generally very reactive. We're not terribly proactive in relationship, all right? We just show up and see what happens. And that's part of the reason that we stumble around and don't do very well at building relationships. We just really can't be bothered to spend time thinking and praying about other people when they're not right in front of us. Okay, out of sight, out of mind is pretty real. And as a result, we show up into people's presence in a pretty superficial state of mind, really, with nothing really new to contribute that we've been thinking about. All right, we're mostly like shooting from the hip, and it's mostly crap. All right, we're called on by the Bible to consider how we will stimulate one another in love and good deeds. And this kind of considering happens when I'm not with the other person and before I interact with them about it. Okay, it's too late to consider anything when I'm standing in front of them. All right, so if I'm going to show up ready to give out and ready to engage, then I should have spent some time thinking about the person and praying about them. And in a close relationship, we're beginning to be able to promote the strengths that we can perceive in the other person. All right, we bring ideas for how to maximize their potential at the same time that we're coming up with ideas for how to help them with the problems that they might have. And so when we get into honest relationships, we're going to find out that people have got a lot of problems. All right? All people have problems. All people are struggling in some areas. All right? We have hang-ups and fears and deficiencies, and mostly we don't even know what all of our weaknesses are. We've got things that are going on relationally that we just can't get a handle on. And we wonder why all the people around us are all such screw-ups and like asses to their spouses. And we never really see that we are the worst one of all. Okay, it's what we are doing that's driving people away. It's what we are doing or not doing that is the problem in our marriages. And the real puzzle here is about how I can get my own head around this and how I can simultaneously spend time in my head thinking about my friends and how to help them get their heads around this idea. And that means that we need to be praying about how we can be helpful. Okay, God has insight into our lives, and He also has a plan for the lives of the people around you. And He will share that with you if you will be in prayer about the people around you. Okay, in the daily time that you have to hang out with God, one of the things that we should be doing is praying about the people that we have relationships with. God will actually give you insight about how to help your friends work out the puzzles in their lives. Okay, so when we're talking about close relationship that's based on biblical love, we're talking about a person that's not really just going with the flow. Okay, we are talking about someone who's approaching their friendship in a purposeful way and trying to make a difference in the other person's life. It's a very different way than the way that most of us are accustomed to relating people. We're not used to initiating at all in a purposeful way. So then we talk about the kind of emotional sharing that would be characteristic of a close relationship. So projecting and expressing feelings that are like loyalty and affection and gratitude. And by gratitude, I don't really mean like, thanks for the beer, dude, right? I mean something more like that you are grateful for the relationship and that the time that you spend together really means something to you. Okay, expressing loyalty would be like making sure that the person knows that you're there for them and you're sticking with them. All right, that's like a declaration of loyalty. And expressing affection, right? Like most of the dudes in the room just went, nope. All right, not happening. Kind of gay. All right, but it's not. It's basic Christian love to tell people that they matter to you and that you like them. All right, and people actually kind of light up when they hear this kind of thing from you. And if we can get past our own inhibitions and tell people what they mean to us, it really will make a difference in the level of our relationship. And because of the investment that we have already made by relating in the ways that we've been talking about, it doesn't seem that weird or that phony to express what's going on. Some of us are really uptight about this. Okay, we would find it very difficult to make any kind of affectionate statement to our friends. All right, and that's all fear. It's self-protection. There's no courage at all in this way of relating. The biggest reason that we have for not doing this is because we don't want to look stupid. And biblical love is risky love. It puts itself out there and it takes the risk. And at the close relationship level, we can be more honest about the disappointments that we experience with the other person. Okay, but we're also very careful to encourage the other person at the same time. All right, now all people are somewhat disappointing. Okay, and as you get deeper into relationship with people, you will be more aware of just how disappointing they are. Okay, in the casual relationships, you see what they're really like, kinda, and people are often questionable in a number of different areas, right? And you may start to think that you're not at all sure that you even want to be friends with this person. But the answer to this, as people that are supposed to be giving biblical love, is that we kind of need to push through that. All right, and it is possible that we need to come up with a strategy for how to bring this thing that is so disappointing to the other person's attention and see if we can call up some change and we can help them change. And this part here at the bottom where it says to encourage is really important. All right, most of us are just way too negative in the way that we relate. We've not really discovered the power that encouraging has to impact people's lives. And we need to be able to notice the cool things that people do that take courage for them to do and that are insightful and that are compassionate. And we need to tell the people that we noticed and that it was awesome. All right, we do really have the capacity to build people up and to soothe them. People need to be encouraged. And people who are giving out biblical love know how to do this effectively. Okay, we could study biblical encouragement for the rest of the day and still be coming up with new ideas tomorrow morning. All right, but encouraging is not the same as flattery. All right, flattery is really just being manipulative and blowing smoke and kissing up. It's false. And it actually sort of discredits the other things that you might say because people can kind of sense that you're BSing them. All right, it's not part of biblical love. All right, so we don't need to flatter people. We need to do real encouragement. And if biblical love is anything, it's real. All right, and so we may need to wait until we see something that can actually be encouraged before we say anything. All right, we often don't realize just how transforming real encouragement can be in someone's life. And people are often in a state where they're virtually starving emotionally, even though they're right in the middle of a group of people that could be building them up. And the simple reason is that we don't think about the people around us or how to build them up. we do not encourage one another. All right, we're choking ourselves out with like snide comments and our stupid cracks at one another. We just never bother to be encouraging. And so when even one of us decides to be encouraging as a way of giving love, then it can transform an entire group. Lastly, we move to talking about our intimate relationships, and there is actually such a thing. So we're now talking about relationship at the very highest level, right? And so this is the kind of relationship that we would like to have in our marriages. And you would think that your life partner would be a pretty intimate relationship. And I'm not really talking about sexual intimacy. I'm talking about relational intimacy with another person. And this is not at all easy. And I'm afraid that a great many walking Christians do not have a single relationship that could be characterized as intimate. And that includes their spouse. Okay, and the problem is that this is relating at the very deepest level, and to the extent that we do not have that in our lives, we're gonna feel a certain measure of loneliness. And this is like fully knowing someone and being fully known. And that is exactly what we crave. And when we don't get there, it's frustrating. Okay, and this is especially true if we have people all around us and we're still lonely. And so at this level, we're talking about an extensive time commitment. Okay, this is someone that you hang around with all the time. And a significant amount of that time is devoted to relating just to that person. All right, your availability in this kind of relationship would have almost no limits at all. And if the question is, are you going to be there when I need you? Then in this kind of relationship, the answer is yes. All right, you've gotten to a point in an intimate relationship where you have like shared worlds. You have the same circle of friends. You engage in a bunch of the same activities, and you have the same goals. You live in the same world with one another. All right, there's a very deep understanding between you. And you would sort of monitor missing time. Okay, you notice when you haven't seen each other for a few days, or when your friend is not involved in something that's going on. And part of the shared world is a common prayer burden. All right, and so for any of us that are believing Christians, this is really a three-way relationship at this point. An intimate Christian relationship is between you and me, and between us and God. Okay, we would be praying together and sharing what God is revealing to you. All right, and that's all part of the common experience that we would have at this level of relating. And as this goes on, over a long period of time, you develop like a backlog of common experience. All right, you've lived through all these things together. And that should become like a fortress in a relationship. All right, communication should become easier because there's like a practical shared memory of life events. There's a sense of history that's been lived out together. All right, and even a lot of your conversations will start with like, remember that time, right? There's like bonding there. There's shared love. And when you invest this way over a long period of time, it starts to overcome a bunch of the deficiencies that the people or the relationship might have had. All right, you will screw some stuff up. Okay, you will hurt the other person, and they will hurt you too. But with a large enough pool of common experience, it's like a drop in the bucket. All right, you can kind of see a longer view of things, and the little things don't shake the relationship all that much. And when we think of like personal inner workings at this level, we're talking about a situation where communication is totally open. Okay, so most of us do have things that we just don't tell anyone. All right, there's stuff that we just don't want other people to know. But if you have an intimate friend, then there is a safe place where you can let that stuff out, and it's safe. And that's what it means to love someone in an intimate way from the Bible's point of view. You are safe. You are home base for that person. And you're not holding back all of your secret crap. And you're a safe place for them to not hold on to their secret crap. All right, if you're holding things back, then the sense that you have is that if they really knew what was going on, then they wouldn't want to be around you. All right, they don't really love me. They love the version of me that I have portrayed. All right, and that makes this extremely alienating and destructive to the idea of intimacy, right? You see that? All right, so it's necessary to reach a point where you can just stand in front of another person as exactly who you really are and see that there's love there. At this level, when two friends are operating at this level, there's a common commitment between them to develop one another's character. All right, we're not just sitting there passively observing their life. We're participants in each other's lives. Okay, and you've openly talked about like what my weaknesses are and what your weaknesses are. We both know what my strengths are and what your strengths are. There's a kind of agreement that we're here to make a difference in one another's lives. All right, and so there will be confrontation in this kind of relationship, but it goes both ways. Okay, it cannot always be one person criticizing the other person, like a master-slave relationship. We're talking about a partnership of equals where we can really tell the truth to one another. All right, and so this means that the affirmation goes both ways too. In the emotional sharing section, it is going to be similar to the close relationship category, but there's like even more freedom to share openly at this level of relationship. All right, and so it's also true that at this level, our emotional giving would be constructive and controlled. All right, this is where a lot of people jump the tracks and harm their potentially intimate relationships. And so we have this tendency to subscribe to the modern view that I am entitled to vent the things that I feel on the people that I'm closest to. Okay, we just walk in and basically emotionally vomit some kind of crazy hostility all over people. And then afterwards, we're just like, well, I was just venting. All right, or one of my favorites, you know how that triggers me. All right, and so the contemporary way of thinking about this is that if you hold your negative feelings inside, then it's just going to build up and it will be bad for you and then worse for the people around you. All right, but we're not balloons. We're not pressure cookers. We're people. All right, anger is not a gas that builds up. It's an emotion, and it's an emotion that needs to be controlled, so that we're not doing damage to the people that we love with the violent and angry things that we say, or the punishing behaviors where we just shut them out for days at a time. Okay, these things destroy the potential for intimacy. They're like relationship destroyers. All right, it's immature and self-centered behavior. All right, so you show me like a couple of friends or a married couple that cuss each other out or that say really cruel things when they're mad, and I will show you a relationship that is not at the level that the Bible would call intimacy. Okay, it's not loving, and it's not headed towards intimacy, and it's not constructive to the other person. Okay, there should never be anything like that happening in an intimate relationship. And if it gets close, someone should be sincerely apologizing. All right, you just can't behave this way and say that you're sorry afterwards and expect that it didn't do any damage. Cruelty from the people that are supposed to be your safest place does devastating damage that is hard to recover from. All right, if you're doing this kind of thing, you need to knock it off. Get a handle on yourself, all right? We need to behave in loving ways that sacrifice and that give itself out. Can't just spill ourselves in the things that we feel regardless of the harm that it does. And so this commitment to share nurturing feelings with the other person has got to be there even when it's not spontaneous. All right? You know, you would have said something nice. You were going to, but now you just don't feel like it. All right? If the urge comes back, maybe then I'll say it. But like the problem is that a lot of the most meaningful and constructive things that you could say will never be spontaneous. You will never have the urge to say a lot of stuff, okay? And you're condemning the people that you love around you to a life without hearing those things. Okay, and you know, if you think that it's phony to say something, if you don't feel like saying it, then you're wrong. All right, and you're hurting the people around you. All right, and especially since it's not at all true that it would be phony to say if you don't feel like saying it. Okay, so it is true that you care about this person. And so it's very good to say so, whether or not you feel like it. All right, and so you're messing things up because you're too inhibited and scared to do something that's uncomfortable for you. All right, so when you're using this model of relating, we need to make a few points about the places where the tension pops up during these times of transition in relationship. All right, and so the key to winning through in these situations is appropriating the power of God, for sure. Some of the things that we have talked about in the last few weeks about love and relationships have maybe elicited the kind of reaction where you're just like, there's no way I can do that ever. All right, it would be too unnatural for me to try to act that way. All right, well, you're right. Okay, you can't do this, but God can, and He's got some stake in this game. He has really good reason to want to empower you to this end. And so the thing that you need to do is ask God to change the way that you are. All right, so you tell yourself that you've always screamed and cussed when you're angry. And you tell yourself that you've always shut people out when they don't do what you want them to do. It's just the way you are. All right, you can't help but emotionally batter your spouse and your kids and your friends. You can't help it. All right, but are you actually saying that God can't help it either? Like, that is what you're saying. Okay, so maybe we need to learn to try to appropriate the power of God. And we can go to Him and ask Him to help us. What He wants from us is our availability, not our ability. Okay, He doesn't expect us to come through with ability. He knows that we're damaged and broken creatures. And He doesn't expect us to transform ourselves. All right, that's never going to happen. But just like that kid that brought Jesus the loaves and the fish, right? How stupid he must have felt handing his lunchbox to God to feed over 5,000 people. All right, and yet it turns out that it was more than enough. So Jesus transformed what that kid gave him. Everyone there got fed, and there were baskets of food left over. The boy in his lunch didn't have the ability to do that. Okay, but they did make themselves available. Kid put his miserable little whatever he had in the hands of Christ. And that is just what we need to do with our relational deficiencies. All right, we need to put them in the hands of God and trust that He will do what He says He's going to do. All right, so availability and persistent prayer about the areas where I know that I'm just not coming through. All right, There are a lot of ways that you are not coming through and that you are not giving this biblical kind of love to the people around you. And you need to be persistently praying to God about those things. And the idea is that we would be trying to become people that give out the love of God to the people around us. And that means that we're going to have to work on ourselves and allow God to work on us. All right, so we do work on our relationships, but one of the best things that we can do for our relationships is to get better at these things ourselves. All right, we have a huge impact on the people around us, and the impact that we have, is that impact primarily in the direction of godly love, or are we having some other kind of impact? Okay, you have all kinds of habits that you hold on to because you tell yourself that it isn't hurting anybody, but it is. Okay, you're doing damage to the people around you that you love by prioritizing things besides them. There's habit after habit and behavior after behavior that you have that needs to be examined and laid at the feet of God. Okay, and it's not for you that you need to lose some of these behaviors. It's for the people that you love. All right, and we need to not be confined to only working at one level. All right, you may have a couple of intimate friends, and you can like sort of tick all the boxes and saying that you're doing all that correctly. I doubt it, but it's possible. But how are you doing with your casual friends? All right, Jesus said that we're not doing it right if we only love the people that love us. All right, intimate friends are great, but we're also supposed to be reaching out to new people and showing them the love of God. We need to continue working on this stuff at all the different levels. All right, and for the love of God, get help from the people around you. All right, there are wise and experienced people around you that have gone through the same things that you're going through, and they are willing and able to really help with the problems that you're having if you'll let them in and listen to what they say. Okay, and you may even build an intimate relationship with the wise old Christian along the way. Right? So people who learn to build deep, lasting relationships can repeat it over and over again, resulting in a happy life. Once you figure out how to get there, it's not that hard to get there again. And the process and the benefits will fill your life with a sense of like spiritual well-being. This is what we were designed for. All right, so we've got to take this a little bit more seriously and start building this from wherever it is that we are right now. Next week, we'll at least get back to having some scripture on the slides, and we'll see what it says about interpersonal conflict. But I'd say that's more than enough for today.